Have you always wanted to start a business? Have you always felt like you're entrepreneurial minded, but you feel like you're stuck in your job? Well, today I have a phenomenal guest I'm excited to bring on. Folks, welcome to the AU show. It's your boy Adi, and today I have the pleasure to interview a good friend of mine who's based in Richmond, Virginia. He's the founder and CEO of Zion Capital, Kofi Thompson. Kofi, my guy, welcome to.
I appreciate it, brother. Man, I'm excited for this. I know when you hit me up, I was like, man, I'll be definitely down to talk on some entrepreneurship, personal growth, and everything. So hopefully we can dive into a lot of things and give some value to your audience today.
Absolutely, man. No, I think just for background, man, like me and Kofi, anytime we chop it up, man, I always walk away like, damn, I'm thinking too small, or like, yeah, I just overthought about doing certain things for no reason. So I appreciate having him in my life. But yeah, man, for me, I always love to kick it off from the beginning. Every person has an origin story, so I gotta ask, man, as a kid, bro, were you the quiet kid? You sat in the back of the class and you were just observing everything, or were you have a hunch to maybe the latter, where potentially, the very active person, like everyone knew who Kofi was, and you potentially, man, you might have ended up in the principal's office once many times. So where on the spectrum was Kofi growing up? Let's say like in elementary school.
Yeah, definitely the latter. Man, I was a little deviant growing up. I would say, definitely, growing up, I was definitely like classified as a class clown by a lot of my teachers. I was always somebody that, always just enjoyed making people laugh and making people smile. It was just something I kind of gravitated towards a lot. But that would generally find me doing things that weren't always the things I wasn't always well behaved. I was oftentimes getting in trouble, whether it be like little, tension or, teachers, saying, "Oh my gosh, you can't do this event because you're bad," all those different things. So I had a lot of energy growing up. I didn't really know how to use it in a way that was constructive. So generally that was, me, doing something, advised. I remember this was like in the fifth grade. We had a substitute teacher come in, and the teacher would go and like, scribble on the board and everything like that. And so I was a little jokester, so I would like throw things at the board as they were looking at it, and they would turn around, and I would just sit there like straight face, just quiet. She'd be like, "Who is doing this?" She'd turn back around, and I'd keep throwing stuff. So yeah, I was definitely a class clown back in the day.
Amazing, man. I think with that too, I think growing up, and I think obviously there's that question everyone asks you, like, who do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to do when you grow up, right? So what were those initial, basically, based off your upbringing and you just like who you were as a kid back then, what was Kofi thinking at, say, like 8 or 10, like, this is what I want to do for work?
Yeah, absolutely. So it actually wasn't finance. It wasn't even close. My mom was Ghanaian, and she had moved here when she was like around like, 14, 15. My dad was second generation Jamaican. And so like I kind of had like the impression of my parents, and they were foreign. So they were like, go be a doctor. That was the track for me. So my parents, they used to give me like little anatomy books, and I was actually really fascinated with like just the human body and how it worked. And so early on, like I want to say like maybe I don't know, second grade or third grade, that's when I started like diving into anatomy, learning all the body systems. And that was what I saw for myself. Like that was the future. Like I wanted to become a doctor. I was thinking surgery at the time, and I always had this like kind of big dreamy mindset of like, man, I want to like do something amazing. I want to like, change the world or create my own path. But it was definitely like in the medical field. I wanted to become a doctor. And yeah, that was the track that I followed for, up until like my early 20s, till I had this transition into finance. But yeah, I always kind of knew that I wanted to do something that would be impactful, something where I was like really serving others. And I love science and I love problem solving. That was something I knew. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty cool, man. I did not know that, but I gotta ask, in terms of like medicine, if you had to like choose a discipline that you were thinking of maybe going into surgery, what would it?
Yeah, so I always choose the hardest things. That is all. I look back at my life and I see that as like kind of a running theme. So I was thinking like neurosurgery, like becoming a neurosurgeon. I've always just been like fascinated with like just like very complex ideas, and the brain is the most complicated organ within the human body. Like we barely know anything about it. We're discovering new things all the time. So that is, I felt like if I had gone down that route of surgery, I probably would have gone towards like neurosurgery or Potentially something like, becoming a osteosurgeon, bone surgeon. I forgot the name, but someone that like also works with like, knee replacements, things like that. Because I also had this kind of architectural mind. I used to play with a lot of Legos and things. So it was either the super complicated neuro or something where I could feel like I had some creativity that was like, osteosurgery, maybe even plastic surgery at the time. So yeah, it was a couple different things up there.
Very cool. So I think, you mentioned until your early 20s, or that was the path you want to go down. So what was it like to go from, obviously you had this level of curiosity as a kid, so now you're going through college, or you're going through like schooling, you're learning more about the human body and all these things. I guess, were those moments where you're like, I'm actually really interested in this, or what was the point where you're like, you know what, this isn't for me, I gotta figure out what's actually like up Kofi's like interest?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there was a couple of different events that actually really changed my career path into finance. So the first one, I always loved, the human body, and I still do. So I had gone through like all the anatomy classes, organic chemistry, physics, all those different things, and it was, on the route. But what the first thing that I experienced that was really made me rethink my career path was I started working at a hospital. And so when I started working in a hospital, I realized that like the kind of vision that I had for what the medical industry would be like wasn't actually what it was. So when I started working in a hospital, I saw that most professionals in the hospital space, they just weren't really satisfied. They were generally unhappy, and maybe just in the hospital that I was working at, but they were generally just kind of unhappy. They were usually just kind of fed up with like how hard they got worked and everything like that. And I just didn't see like I remember working there for years, and like it would be rare when I came across a smiling face. I just like it looked like everyone was just in a bad mood, like all the time. So I was like, man, like, do I really want to go into this career? And one thing I always would do is I would kind of project into the future and how I would, feel about things. And I'm like, okay, I know that I'm a pretty happy guy. Do I want to be in an environment where everyone's pissed off all the time? Doesn't really seem that, cool. And then also through working in the hospital, also someone that like likes to have the autonomy to change things that I don't feel are right. If I see something that needs to be changed and needs to be innovated in order to like serve people better, like I want to be able to change. And I realize that like because of how institutionalized the medical industry is, you don't really have as much flexibility to do things that you may feel are at the best interest of like your patients. You really have to operate within these, lines and all these different which a lot of them are there for a good reason, but then some of them are just there and they don't really help serve people, at the end of the day, because we have to acknowledge, the medical industry in America is in the capitalist system. It's a huge portion of that. So that was the first thing that I was like, okay, I'm starting to question whether or not this is right for me. The second thing was, unfortunately, when I was in my early 20s, my dad got diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And so at that time, it was right after I'd like completed a lot of my courses and everything. And I started to realize like, man, like he's really getting sick and I need to be in a place where I can, one, help him out financially if that comes up, but also like go to chemotherapy appointments with him and have the flexibility. And I realized that I would not have had that in medical school. Like I would have been, putting in overtime hours, just like studying, and I would not have had any flexibility. So I was like, man, like, I really made me think like I have to go into the career space or get a job because I'm not going to have the type of flexibility, in medical school. And then third thing, which was a consequence of him getting sick, but I started to realize like all the stuff that he did not do financially because he got sick, and I realized like, okay, like, we were like, okay, let's do the estate planning stuff. Like, does he have a will in place? Like, did not have a will in place. Does he have a medical power of attorney? Does he have a financial power of attorney? Does he have, all these various documents that he needs, during this time in life? And no life insurance whatsoever, no investing, none of these things. I didn't know much back then, but I realized that like he did not do things right, unfortunately, in that space. And so in the rush of like having to get all this stuff together, I was like, man, like he was a smart guy. He had two masters, a master's in computer science and master's in engineering. Like he was a really great professional, but like he never really figured out the financial side of life. And I realized that for me, even through all this schooling that I had done, there was not a single class on personal finance or anything along those lines. So I'm like, wow, there's a massive gap here. So I remember I was like reading a lot and diving into a lot of financial things, learning about investing, learning about compounding interest, learning about life insurance, estate planning. And I was having a conversation with one of my friends at the hospital, and I was like, hey, you should start investing now because you can take advantage of time, right? The earlier you start, the better. And she was like, "Oh yeah, you should go see my financial advisor." And I was like, "What is that?" Like I didn't know this was a career.
Right.
And so I went to go see him because I'm a nerd and I get obsessive about things that I find interesting. I brought this little booklet with all these different things, what ETFs, bonds, mutual funds. I wanted to learn a lot, and so I met with him. We sat down, had a great conversation. He taught me a lot. After that conversation, I want to say it was maybe like a month or two after, because during it I told him I was like, man, like I'm thinking at the time I was thinking about getting my real estate license. I was like, I gotta find something that can give me the flexibility to take care of my father and everything. And about 2 months later, the director of the firm reached out. He's like, hey, this guy let me know that you're thinking about a different career path outside of medicine. And he mentioned that, or he was like, yeah, I know that you considered real estate. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I think you could be a great financial advisor. Like, the guy you met with had really great things to say when you met with him, and he thinks you're great people, and he, sees your intellectual curiosity. So I was like, okay, I'll try it out. So I went through 5 interviews and they offered me a full-time position, and it was awesome. And a couple of things that appealed to me in the career is one, that, obviously I had the flexibility that I needed because it was like a contracting role. Even though I didn't have my own business, I was still essentially just a contractor. Like a real estate agent's a contractor to a brokerage. Two, I was able to, start making money so I can help my dad out. And then three, like the path of a financial advisor, like it's really the path you can want to create for yourself. There's so much to learn. And so I realized like I could spend my entire career learning about different things, whether that's, planning for small business owners, planning for IT professionals, planning for real estate professionals, planning for high net worth individuals. There's just so many things to learn, taxes, deferred compensation plans. And again, just because I like hard things, I was like, this seems really cool. So yeah, that was the path I took.
Love it, man. There's a lot to unpack, though. One thing I was going to say, man, I think it's funny because when you go to like a hospital or just any medical center, like the first person they ask is how you're doing. And it's like not, they mean well, but they typically, usually not there because you're feeling well, right? Whether it's mentally or physically, unfortunately. So I had to bring that up, man. So it's a name of the game. But no, man, I think the why is important. And I love how, again, I'm glad hopefully your dad's in a better place now, but I think there's usually some level of traumatic event, or there's some event where it's like, dang, like it really caused that shift. And to your point, growing up in schooling here, like, dude, the only time we learned anything about finance was, I think, senior in high school. They gave us like $100 of balance, like for groceries, right? And even going through business major, it's like you learn how to balance a company's books, but very rarely it's like, okay, like as an individual, like how do you plan, for like 3 months from now or 6 months? So yeah, unfortunately, it's a lot of the stuff you just have to learn on your own, and it's not really broadly shared.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's such a massive area where so many people, need help in and need assistance. And, through my career, I realized that it doesn't matter how much money you make. There's so many other aspects to, truly planning and, personal finance, because there's, management of the money. What are you doing with it? Is it just sitting around or is it actually, working for you? Are you protecting it like from loss? And then, what does your legacy planning look like? So there's so many different, you know, uh, nuanced areas of like true and proper wealth management that yeah, really just it's exciting.
Absolutely. So I know you already were molded into like your production, determines your survival, right? So I think that's usually the normal like shift going from working a job where you're paid for your time versus as an entrepreneur. It's all output based. Like you could spend years doing something, but if no one buys, your service, like you don't get paid. So I think having that initial shift of like being a producer and having to hunt, what were some of those growing pains like there? Because I'm sure there had to be some rough nights where you're like, dang, is this going to work? Like, will this work for me? Like, am I doing the right thing? What was that like for you?
Absolutely. So, and I jumped, straight in the deep end. So I went from, my job as a pharmacy technician to straight up, working as a contracted financial advisor with no salary. So yeah, I'd say about 9 to like 11 months of just grinding out. So I'd say the first year of my career, I like one, I did not do well. So I would say the first really 11 months, like for me, in order to like, provide a service or sell or however you want to put it, like I truly have to know what I'm doing and know like what I'm, going to be giving or serving people with, because like I guess there are some people out there that can just like go and not really understand what they're doing and just sell to whoever. But like I was like, okay, I want to make sure that what I'm doing is going to be great for people. So if I'm providing them with an investment or insurance policy, I want to make sure, hey, this is going to be the right thing for them, in the long term. So I spent a lot of time studying, a lot of time learning and growing, and I wasn't running a business. I was
Right.
just really learning, how to be a professional. And, um, for the first 11 months, I want to say I maybe made like, eight or $9,000, which, isn't much. So fortunately, I had like 6 months of, savings and everything before I had started. And like my bills were like, really low. Great things, as an entrepreneur, you want to keep your expenses, as low as possible. But yeah, for the first like again, I don't remember exactly, but I want to say 9 to 11 months, I really did not, make much. So I was just putting in 12, 13-hour days, meeting as many people. So it's really this like long-term gratification that you got to get used to. And you really got to be patient. But then in my last month as an advisor, I made what I made in my entire last year at my job as a pharmacy technician. And at that point, I was like, yeah, this is definitely the career for me. Like there's no doubt about it. Like this is definitely the career for me. So there was a lot of, just frustration, a lot of like long nights, but I really thought about it, because first, like I mean, it wasn't just this new business that I was creating out of nowhere. I wasn't like designing or inventing some new product or some new service that didn't have a market. Like I was in a established like finances, like that's one of the oldest industries, investments and insurance, very old industry. So fortunately, I had proof of concept. Like other people have done this before. So I really just thought about like, okay, there's probably an advisor out there, and I can't be the dumbest of every single advisor out there. So if as long as I'm not the like the stupidest advisor out there, and someone has succeeded that may not have as high of an IQ, I can do it as well too. So I just thought about like I just need to continue to work, and if I am doing something wrong, learn as quickly as possible and change my behavior and keep doing it till I can get to a place of
I love that, man. I appreciate the vulnerability. I think unfortunately in today's day and age, there's this perception, right? Especially with social media that like, hey, like you starting out, you're like, whether you're a contractor, you're starting that new business, that day one, start something, like day five, made it. I think there is just that, the people just believe that it just happens so quick. And for you to be honestly, hey man, look, even if it was an established thing, the first year was not my best, but hey, I had the persistence, I had the grit, and I think that helped propel you to, now where you run your own company. So I guess, how do you think going through those early days helped you and like help you figure out when you were ready to take that leap of faith? Because that's a pretty big leap to take, to go from an established company to now you're building that establishment yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would always say, like, I'm pretty, like, I like to think I'm very self-aware, and I'm always very, like, reflective over, like, the things I'm doing. And so even when I had started, at my previous company, like, I always kind of saw myself, like, building something that I could, at the end they kind of put my name on. I do believe in, like, ownership. I do believe that's extremely valuable. So I really, the first, if I think back, the phases I kind of went through, my first phase was like I had to learn to be an advisor and to be and I wanted to, my biggest thing is like whenever I do something, I want to be the best in the world at it. So I had to learn to be an advisor. So after my first year, which, was a lot, at second year, I actually became one of the top advisors in the southern region of the US in my company. So I really, worked hard, and again, just from putting time in, I was able to find success there. So I really had to learn how to be a good advisor over the first, I'd say like 2 to like 3 years of my career. And I was putting in like 12-hour days, working, in the office by like 7 or 8 and out of the office by like 7 or 8. And then after that, I realized, okay, like I know how to be an advisor, but I don't know how to run my own business because it's very different. And this is something that I often will tell, a lot of people that I, may give advice to or mentor, but like being a professional is different than running a business. Like you can be You could have your license as a doctor, as a therapist, or, engineer, but that doesn't mean you can just go out there and, you know how to be a CTO, a CMO, a COO. Like, there are
Right.
many aspects and hats that you have to wear as a business. It's not just that profession. You have to do your finances, you have to market, you have to sell. There's all these different things. So I realized, hey, I have a gap of knowledge here, business. And so I started to learn. I really started to, like, fortunately I got into like a leadership team. I picked up a lot of different books, started learning and a lot from failures as well too. But I learned the aspects of like how to run, my own practice, my own business. And I feel like, even though I didn't, when I was at my firm, I didn't have to build everything from like scratch and make all the decisions. Like everything was kind of just like plug and play. It's kind of like a franchise model almost. Um, I still, the biggest risk I had there was still the financial risk because I had to go and build my own book of business. So like that part, once I knew I could do that, I was like, okay, at least I know I can gain clients. I still
Right.
gotta learn all these other things, but at least I know that, hey, I can like gain clients, I can serve people, and what I'm doing works because I hear the feedback from the people I work with. So I knew that part worked, and I just had to learn the, business aspect, which was, I think it's a lifetime process. Yeah.
Absolutely. You got to be a student for life. And I think, too, the other question I had, man, is I think we talk about, to your point, being a professional versus being a business owner. And, for some folks, they have the experience before they start their own company of managing folks. But for other folks, usually some people, they come from being a phenomenal contributor on a team, like they really crush it. And then they have to learn how to, crush their work and also manage people. So I'm curious, what was it like for you to hone in your own leadership style that you found that's worked for you up to this point?
Yeah, so I follow a very transparent, like just ground level leadership. I really, I could have read every single leadership book out there, but like what taught me best how to manage people is simply managing people. Like when I got my first employees, like I really learned a lot of things and I did not do all the things right. I, was maybe too micromanaging or I would blow up over something or, what have you, or I didn't, properly put together like SOPs and train people well. I just assumed like, oh, this should be like easy just because I was so used to it. So I had to learn a lot about managing people. And, one of the biggest things that I would say has made a difference for me in regards to my management, my skills as a leader and a business owner. A lot of times people ask me like, hey, like, what should I do? What book should I pick up? What should I learn? The best thing to do is to learn about yourself because your capacity to lead is only going to go as far as the capacity to which you grow. And if oftentimes I see people that, they may not be able to have a difficult conversation, which that's not something I was able to do when I first started. I realized this is going to impact my leadership. If I can't tell an employee or tell a client, hey, like, you need to shape things up, I'm not going to be able to lead them well. If I have trouble with my own discipline, I'm not going to be able to like, I feel like it's lacking integrity to discipline, others and get on someone else's butt about that. So like, I realize like the more I improve myself, the more I get to learn and understand myself, it really helped me, as a leader and as a manager and, and a business owner. Yeah.
Absolutely, Kofi. You and I can go on for hours and hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. One final question for you, Bob. When it's all said and done, man, let's fast forward, let's say 25, 30 years from now, even 50 years from now, right? What does Kofi want Zion Capital's legacy to be? And like, where do you want to take your business?
Yeah. So, absolutely Forbes list. That is definitely a goal of mine. I do want to build one of the biggest practices in the country. And, I've thought around to this concept of, okay, like, will there be a point at which I kind of like throw in the towel or maybe just continue to build the business so it can be a legacy, and continue to serve people. And I've really started, most recently, I've narrowed down and realized I want to build something that's going to last, beyond my own life. The approach that I take with finances is, very different than a lot of large institutions. I work with, fewer people and do a lot more personalized, customized planning. And a lot of it just surrounds their goals. There's a lot of things I don't like about the financial industry. Like, oftentimes they're, your banker doesn't understand what your goals are. It's like,
Right.
how can a professional truly serve you if they don't know who you are? And oftentimes there's a misalignment between what the company wants and what the people want that are going to that company. So I really try to build the type of business that would go to and I would want my family and friends to go to. And I found that it's really made a huge impact on a lot of lives and people that I work with. And, I kind of see this as like a different way of approaching planning that can truly, help people, but not just in the financial space, but also with like life as well too. So my goal is to build something that's going to last and build something that can also ultimately really change how millions of people look at personal finance and building wealth.
That's phenomenal, brother. And we look forward to seeing the progress and look back at this episode once you hit those goals. But no, with that being said, we appreciate everyone's time today. I will be sure to have Kofi on again soon. And that's it. Signing off.
So appreciate it, brother.